Bamgboye, and I'm lead consultant for A-Dynamics. So A-Dynamics is a specialist consulting firm in Nigeria. We're focused on developing solutions that meet the needs of Africa. So most of our learning solutions are developed in-house, and they're based on research. Based on research for current experiences. In other words, we believe in transformation, but we don't believe in borrowing solutions from outside of Africa for transforming. So we're kind of like one of the very few consulting firms in Nigeria that actually develop our knowledge base based on experience. So this program that has been developed was developed in-house and based on our own research. So it's going to be we're going to be very interactive on this. I'm very conscious of the fact that you're all creative people, so you don't like to sit down for too long, and you don't like to sit down and listen to someone talk, and you are not saying anything. So I have that in mind, don't worry. And I'm going to like breeze through theories, because I know you don't like theories either. So do we have an agreement with that? Okay. All right. Do we have something to move the slides, or I have to move them myself?
Oh, no, we don't have to take it.
Okay, so if that's the case,
Ochee can do it, Ochee can do it.
okay. Thanks, Ochee. Okay, so first and foremost, like I said, we've developed this in-house. And so in some of the work, just like Mrs. Asika said, one of the issues in Africa is time management. And so, I mean, I went to live in the UK for about 14 years and then came back to Nigeria. And because when I went to the UK, I was already like 20-something. So I already had what you'd call my base cultural mindset before I got there. And having come back, when I came back, I didn't realize how Eurocentric had become. Because like while I was there, I didn't realize that I was actually imbibing some of their own cultures as well. It was only when I came back here and I was in this environment, and then things happen and I say things and people will laugh and say, you must be from away. And I was looking at myself and thinking, I'm Nigerian, you know, so how come I'm getting this? So a lot of the experiences I had is what prompted me to design this program. And I realized that if we were going to intervene for effective time management in Africa, it has to be a holistic approach. And what do I mean by a holistic self-management approach? What I mean is each person has to look at their own shortcomings when it comes to time management, and then use their own particular style to intervene and roll back some of the personal, because a lot of the things I find, people react to time management issues in different ways. So we're going to be looking at it that way. So basically, while we're going on, feel free to stop me, give me your own personal experience, some of the things that you think hold you back. We have some material here which you're going to also be able to use to actually identify what some of your own personal time, space issues are. But before we go into the personalization, we're going to look at some of the wider issues that, that come to bear. So we start off by looking at what we call the social-cultural dimensions. I'll explain what that means. Then we'll look at organizational culture. When we get to that, I'll also explain what that means. Then we'll look at the personality from a broader perspective, and then individual competencies. Okay? So this is just introductory. As we go into the actual topics, then I'll explain exactly what all these concepts mean. I hope I'm not speaking too fast. Okay. So basically, if you're struggling or grappling with time management, they're usually based on two levels. First one is the macro level, and then the second one is the micro level. I know it sounds very like economic, but it just means, macro just means it's outside of your control, and then micro means that it's within your control. That's really the what those two very big words mean. Now, at the macro level, there are two areas again. You have the social-cultural and you have the organizational. Then at the micro level, you have what you call your personality traits and you have your individual competence. Okay, the difference between your personality traits and your individual competence is that your traits are natural and then the competence is something you've learned. So that's basically different. So we're going to be looking at those two. We'll start off by looking at the social-cultural dimension. Keep going. Again. So I don't want to bore you with theories. So I've put this here for people who want to go and do more research, if you're that kind of person. Basically, I've just put some references that if you could Google, you would find out a bit more about some of these theories. In other words, people have similar attitudes based on the group or the environment that they're in. And there are lots of theories to prove that those values, it's called an orientation, a value orientation. So there's been sufficient theories to prove that there are certain values that certain people hold and they are usually stable. So there are lots of them. You have issues around how people react to nature or supernature. That's one. Then you also have issues around whether people have a long-term orientation or a short-term orientation. And then you then also have issues around communication, in other words, how people communicate. So what these theories are saying is that it's usually stable. So you basically can tell where people come from based on how they will react in those value areas. They're kind of like specific value areas that peak out and stand out. Now, the reason why we talk about this is not to give an excuse. It's not to justify and say, well, it's something that is part of my culture, so I cannot change it. That's not the reason why we do this. It's to raise an awareness so that you then know how to respond. And based on how you respond, you would reduce the impact that it will have on your own personal time management. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So, before we even go into that, let me ask you people, what do you think about that? Do you think it's true? So in other words, do you think that based on your culture, there's certain things that you do subconsciously that is linked and based to your cultural base, so to speak? Let's look at it now from being Nigerian as opposed to being Igbo or Yoruba or Hausa. Let's just, what do you think? Do you agree or do you not agree?
I think proverbs, using proverbs, it's a serious, it's a major thing that most Africans use to justify whatever they want to do. For instance, if a person is late, rather than say, oh, I'm late, you say the economic situation and find one proverb, one African proverb that really justify why he has to be late. So do you have can you think of any? Just share some with us. Like proverb, not that I can think of in my head right now, but I know that our culture is closely linked to proverbs, adage, and usually to pushing what we have, what we want other people to believe. For instance, this may not apply here. Someone say heaven helps those who help themselves. Something like that. They may even tell you from the scripture, but it's not actually. It's not.
Yeah.
So things like that, you use it, especially for instance when you want to deter someone, you probably use one scary proverb to scare the person.
Thank you for that. I like what she said in the sense that proverbs are a way of, if you want to understand the cultural value base of a person, just listen to the kind of proverbs. So for example, if you think about Yoruba proverbs, there's one particular one that actually is Yoruba, but unfortunately I can't actually speak Yoruba. But there's this particular that says, oh, the literal translation is like, oh, I will enjoy the life of my head. Where are the Yoruba people here? And what do Yoruba people do? so the proverbs, always. And then when you now go to like the Hausa, is there any Hausa person here? Anybody that speaks Hausa? They have some proverbs. For example, there's one that more or less says that to be blessed is better than to be first or to be in a hurry. So again, when you look at that proverb, you're going to now say, okay, so this is why, you know, like people will say, oh, Northerners have a tendency to be just, you know, cool, calm, like, this and that. They'll just say, inshallah, there's no rush about this thing. If it's mine, it's mine. So proverbs are a good way of actually understanding somebody's value orientation. Some people see time as a linear thing. In other words, whatever you do is what will determine where you will get to. And then you have the other set of people who believe that that opportunities and things that you get is an issue of a moment in time. That's just the basic difference about the two cultures. I'm sure you can figure out which is which. Yes?
Yeah, there's a question I want to ask.
Yes.
Actually, I don't believe in this issue of African time.
Okay.
Sometimes I go to a party, they will tell me I should come around 2 or 3.
Okay.
I'll make sure I get there and at that point in time, 2 o'clock. When I get there, I'll just discover I'm the only person there.
Yeah.
And for some people, they always have this mindset that when you get there first, people will think, because you don't have food to eat or you're going to get some. But I don't believe in that kind of thing.
Okay, let me just, because I want us to kind of like understand the bigger issues. I know you say you don't believe in it, but is it not a reality?
Yeah. It's a reality, as that's what I've been facing when I go to an event.
So that's what I want everybody to understand, that it's a reality that affects all of us because it's a macro issue. So if you have a meeting and you get there at 2, and 6 other people who are supposed to be part of your meeting are trickling in at 3, 4, 5, it affects you. That's the reality. So the important thing is, how do you now work in such a way that, thank God, you have broken out of that situation. How do we all work in such a way that we can infect the other people with our own way of looking at time? That's really what we're trying to do here today. That's the most important thing. And so the first thing is to actually become aware of that it's actually hinged in a culture and a cultural setting. So once people become aware of that, then they begin to snap out of it, so to speak. But if you don't have the awareness, then you don't snap out of it. So let's look at some of the other things that so the monochronos are basically the Western cultures. So you basically, what do? They do one thing at a time, they concentrate on specific tasks. As I said, their time is expendable and linear. That's why you find that in the English, they have something called time is money. Or in America, they say time is money, because they believe it's expendable. You know, they also have something, there's this one that they always say, that the Europeans have the clock, but the Africans have the time. You know, so those are some of the things that you hear that tell us exactly which time space we are in when it comes to how we look at time. Then when it comes to low context, I'm going to explain, sorry, before I go to low context, we also have the one where they view achievements and accomplishments as a consequence of what you have done within the time spent. That's one of the biggest issues. So one set of people look at accomplishments and achievements based on what you have done and the time spent. The other ones look at it based on opportunity and and position, or whatever else you want to call it. Then we now move to what I call the low context. What do we mean by low context? That means that their communication codes are explicit. So what that means, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. If you were in a meeting with where the majority of people are European or whatever, the agenda will be clear, and the agenda will be followed, and then if somebody says something, the next person will say, yes, I disagree. Why do you disagree? I disagree because A, B, C, D, E. Then when you go to the other group who are high context, agenda will not be clear. Some people will shock in new things into the agenda that were not supposed to be there. You will say something and turn to the other people and you say, what do you think? Everyone will say. But when you now look around, eyes are moving around, they're like, that's what we mean. That's the difference between high context and low context. For high context, a lot of things are unspoken. There's like a understanding communication that means that a lot is not said. So because a lot is not said, decision making becomes a much longer and tedious activity. Does that make sense? Yeah. We are highly distractible and subject to interruptions because we have, extended relationships. Relationships are important in Africa. So because of that, things are highly, distractible. People will just come to your office without saying they're coming. And you can't say you won't see them. If you do that, they'll say, what is the meaning of this? Who do they think they are? Just because they now have money. So you can't really do that. Then we consider time, I've already said that before, consider time commitments and objectives to be achieved if possible. Then we're high context, like I said, we have restricted codes of communication. So we have a lot of assumptions. Assumptions meaning that I won't say what I need to say to you, but I assume that you know what I mean. That's what we mean by assumptions. And then a lot of communication is non-verbal. So it takes time to figure out what exactly are we talking about. Then we view achievements and accomplishments as a consequence of life opportunities or personal relationships. So you don't think, okay, it's not how many times I go to that office. If I just know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody, I'll just pick up the call and the thing will be mine. So how am I rushing? And then the other things, we're committed to people, we change plans often and easily, are more concerned with, okay, I left that out. Then the last one there is most important, which is that we have the strong tendency to build lifetime relations. Whereas the Western, they don't really, necessarily have lifetime relations or relationships. Okay? Any questions or any input at this time? Yes.
When you say base promptness on the relationship, what do you mean?
The last one.
Promptness, like.
Basically, what we're trying to say there is that if somebody does not respond to you on time, you feel that you basically will feel, oh, it's because that person doesn't regard me highly. So basically, if you went to see someone, if you went to an office, whereas in the West or whatever, it's a case of this person has come, this person has an appointment now, so this person is going to be seen. Someone in our own relationships, somebody could have waited for 4 hours, whereas another person just walked in. But because of the relationship that last person has, they will walk straight in, which means that your waiting time, if you who is supposedly not really known, will now drag. Yes? Okay, that was actually not so clear. So that's what we mean by base promptness on relationship. Depends on how close you are. You can jump 10 people waiting to see someone. And, yeah? Okay. All right.
As Africans, we are here to see the connection between time and money.
Exactly.
And until we get to that point, where we see time as a resource
As a resource.
rather than as an expense, then things will naturally adjust. For instance, look at our payment system. It may not apply to people here, but generally most people are paid monthly. So usually your time of work is from 9 to 5. I personally believe that if we introduce systems of paper hour or paper per week or something, things will readjust, especially hold-ups.
Especially
Hold-up traffic.
yeah.
Because you see that everybody is trying to move at the same time.
Yeah. Let me hear her because I can see her shaking her head. Tell me, what's your...
Well, we're actually talking about this yesterday because we're in traffic in Apapa. That if Nigeria has the pay per hour system, then a lot of people will be very poor because everybody will be trying to get out at the same time, and it will even cause even more traffic. And then the fact that you're being paid per time would reduce how much you can get really. Because if you're stuck in traffic most of the time, then
No,
I shouldn't be so biased, but I know that Nigerians have to make their money, and once they have to be paid per hour, they will get paid. That is for sure. Because when it comes to the money, they become superhuman. Nigerians become superhuman when their bottom line is being threatened. You will suddenly see Batman flying from Ikeja to VI. I think so. That's my belief. I might be wrong, but that's what I believe. So I agree with you 100%.
because by the time you realize that you spent or you have lost money because of traffic, or you have lost money because one guy didn't fix the road, by the next election you're going to throw that guy out. Because
that's a very good connection. I like the way you connected.
Things will suddenly readjust, because you will now find people who are more active, especially in terms of government. Because as a local government chairman, you can't afford to misbehave.
Exactly.
Because if I lose money because I'm in the traffic, or because the road is bad, or because there's flood on the road, then I throw you out of office because you're not doing your job. Because you're making me lose money.
Listen to this gentleman in blue.
Yeah, I want to share an experience.
Yeah.
But I must say that the issue of traffic is relative because Nigeria is not Lagos.
Nigeria is not Lagos.
Yes.
Exactly. That's a good point.
When you're taking Lagos as a specimen here, but where I come from, I come from Enugu.
From
Enugu. You hardly see traffic.
But tell me, since you are not in Lagos,
I stay in Lagos now, but I grew up in Enugu.
Okay, so tell me, how does African time affect you when you were in Enugu? Did it affect you?
At times it's abnormal. It's more in Lagos here.
It's more in Lagos here. Okay, that's good to know.
Even when you go for functions, like people go for wedding by 3, 4, that not with the exception, they're going home.
Okay. That's
so if I
but
get in there by
people
3,
arrive late at places. Is there always issues of arriving late,
like in school day, in secondary school, for those that are not in boarding school, you get to school at 6:30 assembly.
But school is usually a structured
because of discipline. At gathering in churches and other functions, that people that come late so often is a habit. We know them for that.
Okay, because I know that in Abuja, there's no traffic is not an issue in Abuja, but people are even worse in Abuja than Lagos.
But these people are going more. There's the kind of penalty to work because it's not paying well, so to speak.
Someone here? Let me ask someone at the back there.
Yeah, I think
I'm a bit conscious of time, that's why I'm kind of like trying to move.
The issue of African time has to do with attitude.
Yeah?
Whether you live in Abuja or in Lagos.
Well, could we, because at the moment we're talking about it from a cultural dimension.
Yeah.
In other words, we're saying that based on our culture, we find that the cultural attitude causes time to be an issue. And I know because like I always, whenever I'm out of Nigeria, I'm in England or something, the amount of things that I can achieve in one day compared to how much I achieve in one day here is just ridiculous. The difference is like this. So I know that it's a recurrent issue. So it's an issue I'm passionate about. And I'm constantly researching and coming up with things about, you know. So I know that it does have to do with attitude as well, but at the moment we're looking at it from the higher macro level, which is that culturally, some people just think that time does not make any difference to what they are going to achieve. But I agree with you that it does come to the point where it becomes an attitudinal thing. But then we're now saying that sometimes it's almost like there's a curse hanging over your head because you are of this part of the world. So your attitude just blends into the cultural setting.
Exactly. I mean, you gave an example when you came back to Nigeria. It had to take some time for you to adjust to the African time.
Yes.
You know.
Because I've even gotten spoiled now. Because for me to be calling and saying, so are we on? Aren't we on? Obviously, I've more or less succumbed. I'm not fighting it anymore. You know, that's what it means. Like, which is sad, really.
Yeah, like in my field, if you say, okay, you have an event that starts for 3 p.m. and you
Tell me what's your field, sorry.
Events and marketing.
Okay, of course, yes.
Yeah. You have an event that will start for 3 p.m. and you have people as at 4 o'clock still strolling in. And when you ask them, what's happening? This thing is supposed to start for 3 p.m. They say, you guys won't start by 3 p.m. Don't worry, by 4:30 I will be there. You know. Meanwhile, you are already set to start your event. And you say, okay, because people are not there, let me wait until I can get people to get into the hall. You know. So basically, whether related to the bigger society or not, it has to do with the African attitude and African mentality.
So we're saying the same thing. Okay, sorry, let me take a question. I'll take the question, then I'll take one final comment and we'll move on.
What I just want to say on the issue of their business, it's in the sense that maybe when they are given a job, they will now feel that if I deliver this job so quick, maybe you charge millions of naira, and the client might say, you deliver so quick. That means the amount being paid to you doesn't worth. I hope you're getting what I'm saying, madam.
No.
As in, because it has worked for me.
Okay, say it again.
Against my competitor. A situation where we're given a job, maybe we tell you to do a brief. Some of them will say, I can't deliver it now. I have to wait for like 1 or 2 weeks. Then immediately within maybe 5 hours or 2 hours, I'll get my own deliver.
Okay.
So, how fast? The next thing they will mobilize me. Why they mobilize the other person? It might take the person like 4 weeks. Maybe on my own part, it may take me like a week. I will also achieve good quality. Some of them will feel that, you know, when you are given a particular job, you still need to delay it, don't deliver it on time. Because they always have that mindset that if you charge someone millions of naira and you are given a job, you deliver it so quick, the person will feel otherwise.
That's actually true. You know, we need to kind of like round up with this discussion, so I'll just take your comment and then we'll move on.
Mine is actually a question.
Oh, okay.
Like if we're talking about African time, and we say is, you know, like the value, like culturally enshrined in us. So if that's true, then clearly it does not depend where we are, like the country that we are in. You know, like for example, if we take this group of people and then we move to another country, for example, I think in an African country, I think my question is, will we still be?
Well, you know that culture is environmental.
Yes.
You know, it's nurture. Culture is the same as nurture. So you environment. That's why you are culturally ascribed some particular things. So if you moved to a different environment, you would still have the culture, but you would then adjust to the new environment. That's what happens, because culture is not static. You know.
But my question is, for example, if we take London, for example,
yes,
like where you stay, for
yes,
example, then there will be, I'm thinking, there will be a difference about the attitude of people compared to an event that has been planned by an African
yes,
person.
but that's actually what it is. That you're actually spot on. If you have an African event, especially if it's a Nigerian event, it's the same thing. You go there, nobody has turned up. Something that's supposed to start at 6, will start at 10.
Yeah.
They even have halls in England that they charge you per hour. Nigerians will pay money and they will waste 4 hours of that money. And then at the end of it, they'll go and argue with them for the phone. Meanwhile, your people didn't turn up. And you know, white people just say to you, sorry, they didn't turn up, so we're not going to pay you. Or they try to get an extension, the hall finishes at 12, you're going there arguing, can we have 2 more hours because we didn't come out? They will say, no, sorry, start packing up. so to answer your question, if you have a group, that same social group, even if they're in a different environment, they would need to adjust because the wider environment is stronger than that. Yes. So because of things like if you don't get to work on time, you will lose your job. You know, if you don't deliver, you get queried, all sorts of things. So that will make you adjust. To kind of like summarize that point, I will just reiterate again that the reason why we had that discussion is not to now rest on your oars and say, well, I'm African and this is part of my nature, so there's nothing I can do about it. The reason why we had that discussion is for you to become conscious of how it affects your wider performance, because you are in a group and activities are becoming more and more group-based. So you're always going to have to work with other people. So what should you be looking at doing to be able to reduce the impact and to mitigate against what the macro cultural dimension does to your own personal performance? And that takes us to the next area, which is organizational culture. What should our culture be? So you actually determine and decide what your culture should be. You know? So how do you come about what your culture should be? You have this, which is your behavioral pattern, shared beliefs, assumptions, actions, and values. So let's assume that this is your organization. So you are a super CEO who has just started, you are like a business startup. So this is just an assumption now. So let's assume that this is you here. And this is where you're coming from. Don't forget you're African. So what you'll be taking from here doesn't actually augur well for what your culture should be. So what do you then do? What do you do with this? You adopt a new one. Thank you for that. So what you do is you adopt a new one. You look around for best practices, all of those kind of things. So the fact that something is your culture, in every culture you have positives and you have negatives. So you are allowed to reject the negative ones. It doesn't mean you're a traitor. That's how it is. That's how cultures evolve. A lot of cultures have evolved. So what they're doing is they're refining. They're dropping the negatives and then they're enforcing and entrenching the positives. And then you now get to the point where your culture becomes some kind of model and people are borrowing. So if you look at our own culture now, let's say Nigerian culture. If this was you, CEO, starting your company, you have all of this that feeds into what your culture should be. What are the things as a Nigerian that you take with you into this culture, into this place? We've already said we will not take the African time one, we will reject that one. What would we take? Think about some things that define us as Nigerians. What are some of the things that you know that you are going to go on with? That you are going to add to what your culture should be here in your organization? Relationships. So we're big on relationships. Bearing in mind that some of the issues why we struggle with time management is because we're so big on relationships. Remember? So we'll redefine. Now I'm happy people are coming with me. You will redefine your relationships. You know, I was facilitating, I'll tell you a story. I was facilitating a class once for Lagos State officials, and we were talking about how time management has to do with attitude, like somebody said, and how certain people, based on how they've always been, continue that way. And we also then try to link it to success, how that some people you just are successful. And we had a discussion whereby somebody said, Fashola, that one thing about him is he doesn't pick up his call. That sometimes you may not get a response from him for like 2 or 3 days. Coincidentally, one person in the class was his cousin. And that one, he actually thought that what he was saying was a negative thing. So he got up and said, oh, you people don't know that how he has always been. That even when he had nothing, that when he was nobody, that you cannot even, that even when he was still in Lagos State Judiciary, that if you go and see him, he would say he's busy. He doesn't have time to talk to anyone. So I now asked the guy, I said, so do you think it has anything to do with where he used to live? Sadly, he couldn't see the connection. He really couldn't. He just kept saying, how can you just not, that even all your relatives, nobody can talk to you, that what's the meaning of that? You know? So basically, you find that sometimes you might be unpopular, but you will find ways. There are ways to maintain your relationships. But as we keep going, you look at other things around your vision and stuff, and then you see how you begin to prioritize. Then based on this, feeding into that, you also have this that fits into here. You know, your vision and all of that. I won't spend too much time because we have a whole part of the training that is going to be talking about this. Now, once you've fed these two in, you then now use this to develop a management style. And then you now also use it to plan and resource. Bearing in mind that time becomes one of the biggest things that goes in there. Because time is money at the end of the day. Okay? So you then have this is your organization here. You have your organization here. What do we mean by this? You are the CEO of the company. So you have your decisions around your resources, your people, and then your finance. Then you have decision making around technology, strategy, and plans. And then of course you have time here. You see that time is on its own to show you how important it is. So what do we mean by this diagram? What we're saying here is that your long-term human resources strategy depends on how well you recruit. So don't rush and just pick anybody off the streets. Design a particular competency plan and say the kind of people that I want in this organization. Somebody said it at the back, that it was you who said it at the back, that the people that always come late for programs and anything, that we already know them. That's what you said, right? So there are certain, you've got to be very, very critical about what you call your core competencies that you're looking for as you develop your organization. So those things are not, oh, he's the best graphic designer in the world. You know that you can take somebody who has got the raw talent and he will become the best graphic designer. But you are not going to be able to take someone who has a mindset that there's no hurry. What is it? It's just everybody has his love job. You cannot do anything about that. So if your organizational planning does not take its time to design core competencies that work towards the kind of people that will help to enhance and maintain your time management culture, then you are in trouble. Then you are in trouble because there will be all the hiring and firing will be going on. You know? Oh, okay. I thought it was 12. Okay, so we keep going. So that's basically what we're trying to explain here in this chart. Then again, this is just to explain that once you have your vision and your mission, You then start to look at what you call your corporate goals. You look at your IT systems. And for people who are IT people here, you know how important it is to have the right kind of systems to enhance product delivery. So if you go and you are still doing manual filing and things like that, it's going to reduce all of that. So it's crucial again. And then, like I've said before, your strategic human resource, in other words, making sure that you look for the kind of people and then you recruit in such a way that you are able to fish out those quality of people. Okay? So basically, to summarize this part, you then have to align and identify all of your spheres and then your priorities. All of the organizational planning we talk about is really what now manages your macro level use of time. So if the organizational culture and organizational planning is not in place, it automatically has an impact on the micro, which is your own individual one. So keep going. So basically, we can give out those I can see some people pondering. You don't ponder. Because we know that at this age, when you get to this age, you know yourself pretty well. If you want a second opinion, when you get home, just give this to either your partner or someone who is a sibling and see if you arrive at the same result. That's usually the best way to get an accurate. Try and concentrate on the work. Take short breaks and keep them short. So don't take a short break and make it long, which is what tends to happen. Are there I people in the house?
Yeah.
So does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Yes. And for the S people, anyhow, S people in the house? S people, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, you learn to say no. Focus. Identify your priorities, please. I'm begging you. Because it's a big issue for us as people. We don't like to say no. So after a while, they feel used and abused. Okay? So you have to learn to say no. Then your C, for C people, limit yourself to reworking things twice only. Don't keep telling yourself that it's not yet okay. I cannot submit this work, I have to redo it. Don't keep working and reworking. Stick to twice. Avoid asking for extensions for completing your time or your work. And just realize that mistakes and criticism is not the end of the world. So if somebody says, this work was not so great, do it again. It's not the end of the world. So it's better to have it in time than for it to be late and perfect. Okay? So does that help? Yeah? So basically, based on all of what we discussed, we're now looking at some of the things that you need to do, which is your planning and your scheduling, your prioritizing. We're going to try and touch on all of them as we go along. So let's look at visioning and how you create a sense of direction. As I go along, I'm going to mention the personalities that will have issues around what. So visioning usually is for the S people. They are the ones that they are the ones that need to really focus and envision and stick to it, because they have the tendency to move around when it comes to prioritizing. So with visioning, what the question you should always ask yourself, especially the S people, if you're an S, make sure this is something you do every day. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? After the 10-year one, come back to 5 years. Where do I see myself in 5 years? And then what are your thoughts every morning? So once you ask yourself, where do I see myself in 10 years, in 5 years, what are my thoughts every morning? And then, I don't even want to look at these other ones. I want to jump to the end and ask yourself, are they linked to that vision that you have of 10 years. And I mean, I'm an S, and it happens to me all the time. Once I do that, I will see that what I was thinking about is different from what I'm thinking for 10 years or 5. So, but when you do that constantly, it brings you back. You keep coming back to track once you do that. That's the whole idea of doing that, okay? So let's not, the most important thing to note about, sorry, go back to that last slide, the one before. The most important thing to note is like, I like this, this quote. It says, vision without actions is merely a dream, and action without vision just passes time. And vision with action can change the world. So it's very, very important for you to look at your situation at the moment and ask yourself, do you have vision but there's no action? Or are you just having action but there's no vision? So you're just all over the place like a headless chicken. Or have you put the two together? Sorry?
No, I don't understand.
Of a headless chicken. Yeah, because you know, like, if you cut off the head of a chicken, they tend to just, and then finally, that's what we mean, a headless chicken. Next one, okay? We all know what planning is, so we're going to keep moving. Now, planning, most important thing about planning is your work proactive or is it reactive? So in other words, are you concentrating on making things happen? Or are you waiting for things to happen and then you respond? And then work on, or you work until things come up. Which one are you? Are you this one, concentrating on making things happen? Or waiting for things to happen and responding? You have to ask yourself. This is what we mean when we say it's a holistic self-management approach. It's down to how you evaluate your own personal time space. Next one. So planning. This is a basic model for planning, which you're going to take with you, with your notes and keep referring to. You always should have an annual plan, a monthly one, a weekly one, and a daily plan. The most important thing to note with your planning is that as it cascades, the time span decreases. In other words, just remember exactly how this pyramid is. As it's cascading, the time space is decreasing. But as it is decreasing, the level of complexity increases. So once you haven't, it's just like how we have this year now. If you haven't done the things you have not done between January and April, what happens to them? They enter into this green space. So once they've entered, what happens? The complexity increases. And then look at how tight here is now. So if you now leave the one from April to September, this is what happens. That's why you see people rushing around from October, because they haven't done anything from here to here. Next one. Okay? So these are the 3 areas of planning. You have your scheduled activities, you have your identification, and you have your people. In other words, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And who are the people? This is where your relationships matter. Because just as we did this, this personality profiling, you also need to do it with the people that you work with. So if you have somebody who is a core contributor to your performance, you need to assess what are they in terms of this thing that we've just done. And how do you work with them based on those things we talked about? So you then know how to manage the results and the deliverables that you're going to get from them based on how you understand the way they work. So for example, if you are a D and you have a C person who is supposed to pass you the financial analysis for you to complete the reports, when you call him, is the report ready? He says, no, the report is not ready. Say, don't worry, you don't have to do it 5 times. Just let me have it. If there's any issues, I'll come back to you. Do you understand? And for people who are working with the ones with I, anytime you call them, their line is going to be engaged. Most of the time, their line will be engaged. So what would you do? What would you do if you had an I person that you need to get a deliverable from? What would you do? What can you think of that you would do to overcome? Because my husband is an I, and my husband's I is this high. So even me, I sometimes cannot get him in a whole day because the line is always engaged. So you know what I do? I've got the phone number of his colleague that sits right beside me. So if his line is engaged, I'll just call. Say, please, can you give him the phone? Of course, I'll hear him say, okay, hold on 1 minute. Yeah, there's another phone. Okay, hold on, the other phone. Okay, I will take my phone. Okay, yes, blah, blah, blah. But I've gotten what I want. So you always have to find a way. And people who are I, they prefer to talk rather than send emails or write. Or that's how they are. They don't like emailing. They want to verbally talk. So the tendency is that all of those interruptions, they tend to interrupt your work as well. But that's the way they work. So finally, what you need to understand about the planning bit is you also have something called a biorhythm. In other words, there are certain times of the day that you are most productive. So like unfortunately for me, mine is at night. So during the day, I don't really like to do, but once it's like 9 o'clock, that's when I'm most. So you just need to find out, for some people it's first thing in the morning. So make sure that you plan your time so that that time when your biorhythm is high, you've done all the things that you need to do. Don't wait until 12 noon when you know your biorhythm is low. And then you go there and you'll be twiddling your thumbs, trying, because what it means is that you're going to spend more time doing what you have done when your biorhythm is high. It's very important. Yeah? And then again, you know, prioritize actions based on must, shoulds, coulds. So do the must first. In other words, I must do this, should do this, and then the could. So if you have finished all your musts, especially this is particularly the people who are D. If you are a D person, when you finish with your musts, don't say, okay, I've finished. And then you just, you know, be there walking around your office, looking at all the other people that are still not finished and thinking that they are so slow. Just either help or do your coulds and your shoulds and your coulds. Okay? Do I get a yes from the D people? I can see some people are like remembering things there. Alright. So you leave room for the unexpected. Don't stack your meetings back to back. It's not a good idea. It's better to leave room. But having said that, the stacking of meetings back to back works for some people. There are some people that want to get the meetings out of the way. I think I people tend to want to get all of the talking out of the way. So that might be better. For the I people, you may want to continue stacking your meetings back to back. Because the tendency is that if you stack your meetings back to back, you may not achieve anything else. Because the meetings might go over and then you spend all the time at meetings. Okay? Alright, next slide. Okay, so we're going to finish soon. So I'm going to just look at the prioritization grid here, and then the rest of it you can look at in your free time. Move to the next slide. Okay, this is what we call a prioritization grid, and we basically look at it from the point of view of things that are important and urgent, and things that are important and not urgent, and things that are not important but urgent, and things that are not important not urgent. So that's why it's called a prioritization grid. Now, you have a short-term prioritization grid and you have a long-term prioritization grid. What you want to do is to work on your long-term prioritization grid so that you are constantly in quadrant 2. In other words, you're always doing things that are important but not urgent. But if you find that you are constantly in quadrant 1, in other words, you're doing things that are important and urgent all the time, then there's a problem with your time management. That's what it means. Now, if you are constantly doing things that are not important and not urgent, like our gentleman here who is on the beach, when he's supposed to be in a board meeting, in which they are going to decide the takeover of his company, then again, we have a major problem. Okay? Now, in terms of personalities, people who find themselves in quadrant 1 tend to be people who are most likely will be D people or I people. They are the ones that tend to be in quadrant 1. But over time, as a D person, you would find yourself here, because D people are the ones that have the tendency not to really worry too much about relationships. In other words, they're not people who want to please. They're quite direct in what they do. So they could tend to find themselves here. But the I people, you know, tend to get distracted a lot. And then the S people, this is S people here because they cannot say no. So they're supposed to be doing something else. Somebody comes and says, ah, please do this for me, quick. It's very urgent. They will leave what they're doing and they will do that because they cannot say no. And then again, I people, because of the amount of time they spend talking and all of that, you could find that they could slip into the time-wasting quadrants.